What's up, Hoopers? Happy Tuesday. I know you're used to me saying happy Wednesday, and I know you're used to me coming to you live from CBS Studios. We're switching things up for today's show. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and eventually you'll see exactly what I am talking about. But don't worry, we still have a jam-packed show for you. We have a new guest in the clubhouse. I'm going to wait to announce who that is in the next block. But look, I get it. As you can see, I'm still wearing all black. It's because I'm still in mourning. I was in all black yesterday on CBS Sports Network and CBS Sports HQ. I'm in all black today. I even have black pants on because, yes, look, I get it. The Knicks lost. You don't have to remind me. I was there on Saturday. Well, I wasn't there, but I was there in front of my TV screen, emotionally stressed out. Look, this was me during the game on Saturday, just tweeting away. I'm sick. There's me with the broken heart emoji. I think we have another tweet as well. Yes, those first two games at Madison Square Garden will haunt me. And look, they kind of still are. But I just want to say this again. That was me on Saturday. Today is Tuesday. So I just want to make this very clear. If you don't reach out to me for my birthday, for Christmas, or any type of accolade or accomplishment that happens in my career, or you know what, just to say hi. How are you doing? How are things? How's the family? How's Cooper? If you don't do any of that during the rest of the calendar year, don't text my phone when the Knicks lose. It's not funny. If anything, it lacks couth. You know what couth is? It lacks that. And again, there should be a statute of limitations when it comes to sports team harassment. I feel like 72 hours is a good window. After that, it's no longer funny. And more importantly, it's no longer relevant. So, yes, I'm aware of the Knicks loss, the memories of the season. I will hold them fondly in my heart. I even have, now that we're at my home setup, we can actually see like my setup here and what we got here. I have here behind me the Eastern Conference Finals towel that I got at Game 2 at Madison Square Garden. For those who don't know, I took my dad to the game, and this will serve me very fondly. I will hold on to her dearly. So yeah, leave me alone. That's the moral of the story. Moving on very quickly, though, before we wrap up and head into the meat of today's show, shout out to the Orlando Magic because I have been talking about the Knicks doing this for years. They just launched and showed the world their new jerseys, and I put new in air quotes because if they look similar to one of the hardest jerseys ever created, it's because they are. This is the Penny Hardaway, Shaq remix type of jersey. I absolutely love this. They also showcase their new court and all of those things. And I have been begging the Knicks to do this, to bring back the retro Knicks jerseys from the 90s with the black stripe going down. You know what I'm talking about. Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell. Those were one of, if not the hardest Knicks jersey of all time, in my opinion. My dad has two of them, I believe. And every time I see it in his closet, I've actually worn it a few times. I'm like, the Knicks need to bring this back. So shout out to the Orlando Magic for giving the people what they want. And maybe the Knicks will, I don't know, take some inspiration from the Orlando Magic. And maybe that inspiration of the 90s will bring us back victorious. Well, not victorious because we lost, but you know what I mean. At least we'll get back to the NBA Finals. While I sit and work through that and make that sound better out of my mouth than it did in my head, let's take a quick break because when we come back, we have Brad Botkin and a new guest in the clubhouse. You're not going to want to miss it. Welcome back, everybody, to Triple Threat. And as usual, we got Brad Botkin in the building. Well, listen, I'm all reversed since we're not in studio. It's not working for me. But making his Triple Threat debut, everybody welcome Sean Little to the show. What's up, Sean? Thank you so much for joining us. And listen, you're in for a really dope show because As we know, the finals are underway. My beloved New York Knicks are not in the mix, but that's okay. Brad, don't gloat. Nobody likes I told you so kind of guy. Uh, but
I
what
won't. I
has kind
promise.
of
I promise.
but what has kind of spawned this very interesting discourse on NBA Twitter is who has won Eastern and Western Conference MVP. And we're going to start in the East because as we know, the Pacers took the Knicks to the mat and ultimately came out victorious on their home court in Game 6. But it was Pascal Siakam winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP over Tyrese Halliburton that had a lot of people raising their eyebrows, including if you saw the viral video of Tyrese Halliburton, even himself, because he kind of stepped forward to the front thinking his name was going to be called and said, oh, yeah, never mind. But Pascal Siakam ended up winning the award. He was named Eastern Conference Finals MVP, like I said, winning 5 out of the 9 votes. The remaining 4 went to Tyrese Halliburton. And it had a lot of people, including Rachel Nichols, kind of raising her eyebrows saying, this is interesting. So we wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of the two guys. Here's the actual voting results. So as I said, 5 out of the 9 votes went to Pascal Siakam. The rest went to Tyrese Halliburton. We have some numbers here that we want to show you in terms of what happened during this year's conference finals. You have Pascal Siakam, most 30-point games in a series. 2025, there you go. Pascal Siakam right there. And he's joined by some famous Pacers company here. Reggie Miller twice on this list. And then if we can go and toss up Tyrese Halliburton, 20 points, 5 rebounds, 12 assists to clinch NBA Finals, NBA history. There you have Tyrese Halliburton, also joined by some very impressive names: Nikola Jokic, Magic Johnson, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain. List goes on and on. But where do you guys stand on who won conference finals MVP? Because if you ask me, I think that Tyrese Halliburton is Tyrese Halliburton. We know what he does. We know how important he is to the Indiana Pacers. But if you ask me, in this particular series, Pascal Siakam was the most constant X factor in this series from start to finish. And I feel like the voters got it right. Sean, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I agree with you. Initially, I was thinking as the buzzer sounded, I was like, I think Pascal might sneak out and steal the Eastern Conference Finals MVP here. I think a big part of the discourse is how you perceive the award. Is it just the Eastern Conference Finals? That's what it's supposed to be, but I think it's human nature to bring in that entire playoff run into it, and then that kind of determines, like, you hear a lot of discourse, hey, they wouldn't be in the conference finals without the way Tyrese Halliburton played. I think what put Siakam over the top was the efficiency. 25 points per game on 52, 50, only 67% from the free throw line, but from the field, he was awesome throughout. He was the guy that was releasing and getting a lot of those easy buckets and applying a lot of pressure on the New York Knicks. I mean, it was a close race. 5-4 out of the 9 go to Siakam. It could have went either way, but I have no qualms with Pascal Siakam getting Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And if you go by game, I think it's 3-2-1 Siakam. Game 1, Halliburton, you can give it to him. We know the choke sign. We know the buzzer. Game 2, Siakam is uber aggressive, scores 39. He won that game. Game 3, they were both kind of blah. Halliburton has one of the best offensive games in Game 4. But 5 and 6 go to Siakam. The reason they were able to tuck away the Knicks was because Siakam was so good in the start of that game in Game 6.
Yeah, Brad, to Sean's point, I think that's the biggest thing, right? I think for me, yes, Tyrese Halliburton had some incredible moments. I mean, we talk about Game 1, what the Pacers were able to do, and that kind of set the snowball effect for the Knicks as a whole, I feel like, in this series, right? And a lot of that goes to the credit of Tyrese Halliburton. But for me, if you ask me as a Knicks fan, who kind of gave the Knicks the toughest time throughout the entirety of this series, my answer would always be Pascal Siakam. I mean, he had their number in so many different ways and was so effective in so many different aspects of the game. I feel like, again, I know sometimes these votes are based on what have you done for me lately, and everyone has the last game in their mind. But even that, I feel like it was the Pascal Siakam game. Where do you stand?
Yeah, there's no question. Now, listen, Ashley, you definitely have some resentment toward Tyrese from the choke sign. So you want it to be Pascal because you didn't like the way he treated, you didn't like the way he treated your Garden folks. But I agree with Sean. I agree with you, Ashley. And listen, we have to remember, Ashley, you and I did this during the MVP debate down the course of the season. We seem to act like these things operate in a vacuum. We're like instant replay in regards to these votes. We get to step back 2 days removed and look at all the stats and consider the entire playoff run and the efficiency and everything else. These are human voters. Okay, it's the same thing as MVP. When I kept bringing up, it's kind of Shea's time. That doesn't feel like the right thing to say, but it's human voters. And if Pascal Siakam finished out that series the way that he did in Game 6, this "what have you done for me lately" thing, we can deride that after the fact and say that's maybe not the barometer by which you should be judging these things. But human beings do that in the moment. It's the last thing they remember. It was a hair-splitting vote. You've got to separate something. And also, for all the talk of all these sophisticated stats and the way we look at things now, listen, points still hold the most weight. 3 30-point games. It's the Game 6 was his game. It's the last thing you remember. You start putting all these things together in an in-the-moment vote when they're passing around ballots in the middle of the game. Pascal's going to win. And also, let me just go with this. We shouldn't be even really debating this. It's the conference finals MVP. It's not the finals MVP. So
hey, that's shade. That's shade. This
isn't even a footnote in history. Nobody remembers conference finals MVP. So, but Pascal, I think he deserved to win. And I think the 5-4 vote reflected what was a fairly even conversation.
I want to lobby for players getting the update before the rest of the world does, because Tyrese's step forward, like, okay, I'm coming through, excuse me, was wild. Like, someone should have whispered it in his ear, like, hey, bro, it's not you. Like, just don't move. When this trophy's pulled out, like, don't move. Well, while the East was a conversation, this actual picture compilation, if you will, is going viral on social media, and it's comparing two different series. It's SGA, who, look, I don't think any of us were surprised when SGA won Western Conference MVP. We know he's league MVP. We know he is the focal point of the Oklahoma City Thunder. But once again, Jason Tatum is back in the forefront, because if you look at SGA's numbers in the series in which he won Finals MVP, or Western Conference Finals MVP, 31 points per game, 46% from the field, almost 5.5 rebounds per game, and 8.2 assists per game. Now, in comparison to Jason Tatum, who in his series, where we all know what happened, the Boston Celtics go on to win the finals, he had 30 points per game, shot 46% from the field, so identical to SGA there, had more rebounds with 10.3, and also had a little bit less assists with 6.3, but a very similar stat line between Jason Tatum and SGA, and it has spawned this conversation of why did Jason Tatum not win Eastern Conference Finals MVP in the year that the Boston Celtics, again, went on to win the NBA Finals. Sean, 2.9 million people have interacted with this tweet. It has gone crazy on social media. What do you make of this?
Yeah, that's clever. That's a clever way to put together a Boston Celtics fan, probably a big-time Tatum fan, to put those graphics up. But they left one thing out, is that there was another guy on the Celtics that also averaged 30, that also shot it better from the field, and he was the guy that won the award in Jaylen Brown. If you go back and look at the numbers and dissect game by game why Jaylen Brown got that Western Conference Finals MVP, it's flat out because he was more clutch. If you go to game 1, if you remember, he had 2 free throws down the stretch and hit a 3 to go to overtime. If you look, and then he backs it up. After he hits the jumper to go to overtime in game 1, they eke out game 1. He backs it up in game 2 with a 40 ball. And then, I don't know if you guys know this, I'm a betting man. So coming down the stretch of that game 4 where they swept, Tatum live was the actual favorite to win Eastern Conference Finals MVP, When Jaylen Brown went crazy in the fourth quarter, he had 10 points to close out in a tight game. Even though that was a sweep, there's a lot of tight games in that series. Jaylen Brown flipped the script. Kind of to what Brad was speaking to, is that, what have you done for me lately? We know what Jaylen Brown did early in the series. Then he comes out and closes it out with 10 points in the fourth. to tuck in the Pacers and win the conference. That's why Jaylen Brown won that award, and his numbers were just as good. Last point, Tatum had 13 turnovers in that series. He was turning the ball over like crazy. Jaylen Brown only had 9. So Jaylen Brown winning that MVP, I have no qualms over either.
No question. Totally agree. Again, we have to remember that these things are decided in the moment. These things are a feel. If you have a hair-splitting thing statistically where you got, this guy's got 30, this guy's got 30, and you start having to break it down to like the fine print, you're going to go on field. Jaylen Brown felt like the best player in that series. He, Sean spoke to it. He had the moment early in the series. He had the moment late in the series where he closed it out. I like that Sean brought up the turnovers. There was some sloppy play throughout that series by Jason Tatum, relatively speaking. Okay, he obviously had a great series, great player.
Right.
But if you go to like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like Jalen Williams had a great series. But there's no question who the best player in that series was. So there was a question with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. It becomes a hair-splitting thing. And so you go on what you remember most. And I think the voters got that one right. I don't think that one was actually as close or should have been as close as this Halliburton and Siakam one. I think Jaylen Brown was clearly the best player in that series. Now, you can always have the argument that the best player gets the most defensive attention and he's the guy that draws the two defenders and makes life easier for everybody else. There's always that more intangible effect of the best player. But in terms of what came through on the screen, who was the best player, Jaylen Brown was the best player in that series.
Yeah, I mean, again, to Sean's point, this could have been a Tatum fan just trying to get his last punch in. And speaking of getting punches in, big city, bigger drama. If you thought the drama of the New York Knicks ended when their season did, you obviously are new here. So when we come back, we're going to dissect everything that is happening in the world of my New York Knickerbockers. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Triple Threat, everyone. Ashley Nicole Moss, Sean Little, Brad Botkin, and we're coming to you not from the studio, but remotely. But don't worry, we have plenty of drama to discuss, including what we're going to dive into right now, and that is all about my New York Knicks. Sean, you're also a Knicks fan, right?
Yeah, I work for MSG Network, so I'm very close to the squad as well, no doubt.
Okay, so you're to feel the pain with me in this segment here. Brad, not so much. Listen, immediately after the Knicks were eliminated by the Pacers and their chances to go to the NBA Finals were squandered, an article came out via The Athletic that highlighted the alleged frustration with Cat's defense in the locker room, saying, quote, behind the scenes, Knicks players and coaches expressed frustration with Cat's defensive habits. Too often, Cat executed incorrect coverages without communicating why, and it became a theme. Players worried that Towns didn't grasp the importance. Now, again, the timing has been impeccable on these, but there was more because yesterday, per Shams, when talking about the Knicks' future, he had this to say: the Knicks have internal meetings this week to really evaluate everything from their coaches to their players. I do expect the Knicks to be aggressive. Tibbs has the support not only of Jalen Brunson, but also the front office. So a lot to dissect here. Obviously, a lot of conversation has ensued about Tom Thibodeau and whether he is the coach that can take you to that next level because of his very particular coaching style and how that translates to the postseason. But first, I want to dive into Karl-Anthony Towns because it seemed like towards the end of that series against the Pacers, there were all these conversations about Brunson and Cat. Can you play your two best guys on the floor together when both of them struggle defensively and they don't make each other better defensively? And while Karl-Anthony Towns had that impeccable fourth quarter, while Jalen Brunson was on the bench in foul trouble that ultimately gave the Knicks some life after being down in the series coming off of the games at home, a lot of questions once again about his defensive effort. So Sean, starting with you, I mean, the timing of this article is, gotta love it. It's usually how the game goes. But watching, Cat play, we can understand there are some defensive holes to his game, and those holes are very frustrating. Doesn't always make the best decisions, gets himself in really just ridiculous foul trouble at times, and that is a domino effect to the rest of the team. We've seen that. What do you make of this a specific quote from this article that leaked after just hours after the Knicks were eliminated?
Why do we do this? We do this every year. Karl Anthony Towns has never played defense in his entire life. This is not something new where it was they thought they were getting a defensive stopper and then all of a sudden he's not playing defense. The guy is not going to morph into a defensive stopper just because it's the Eastern Conference Finals. We do this with Luka Doncic every year as well. He gets deep into the playoffs and then we're like, hey, Luka, he's not playing defense. Karl Anthony Towns and Luka Doncic don't play defense. The bottom line here is Leon Rose and the gang in the front office at the Knicks thought OG and Mikal Bridges' defense would be able to cover up Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. It didn't work out that way against the Pacers. So the talk around Karl Anthony Towns not playing defense shouldn't be a shocker to anyone because he hasn't played defense ever. And I agree with you, Ashley, just a lot of mindless lapses, whether it be fouls, whether it be rotating, whether it be getting back on defense. It does seem like mentally he could clean up some of that stuff. But Karl Anthony Towns is never going to be a defensive stopper. He never has been, and he won't be next year. So it's something the Knicks are going to have to work through.
Brad, to that point, I mean, I was having a conversation yesterday with Roy Hibbert, and he said, look, maybe in the offseason, Karl Anthony Towns works on his defense and we get a different player. To Sean's point, and I agree with this, a leopard doesn't change their spots. You know, it was kind of the same conversation and the frustration when you go back to Carmelo Anthony and Mike D'Antoni and Phil Jackson. Melo's not known for his defense. I love Mel. Even Mel will say, look, at Syracuse, that wasn't our thing. It kind of is just how my game unfolded after that. He plays it, but he's not a defensive guru, never going to be in DPOY, never going to be all team defense. It's just not who he is as a player. So knowing that about Cat and knowing that you can't hide that with the players you have at your disposal, what are the conversations you think are being happened or had right now if you are the New York Knicks?
Okay, one, this should be a successful season. We shouldn't be like reevaluating every single thing that the Knicks did. They got to the conference finals. The Knicks have been largely irrelevant for a couple decades now, 25 years since their last.
Whoa.
Let's call it what it is. Okay, so like they had a few Randall seasons in there, and where the bar was really low, and they made the playoffs. Okay, and then got beat. So the Knicks made the conference finals. They were designed to beat the Celtics. They beat the Celtics. They had an elite offense. They should have known that was going to be their strength. Mikal Bridges hasn't been Phoenix Mikal Bridges, defensively speaking, for a while now. Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns are going to struggle defensively, and they made that decision. I think back to when the Golden State Warriors almost traded Klay Thompson for Kevin Love, and it was the same idea. Stephen Curry and Kevin Love. How are you going to stop this pick and roll, pick and pop tandem? Two elite offensive players. But the Warriors held off that trade because they wanted somebody that complemented Curry more defensively, covered for him more than somebody that was going to exacerbate his own defensive limitations. The Knicks went the other way. They went with somebody who was going to exacerbate Jalen Brunson's defensive limitations. The two of them together is like gas and fire, and the defense starts burning down. Okay, and that's the deal. That's what they signed up for. Now, do they want to all of a sudden after a conference finals run say, oh, my God, we thought we were going to be better defensively. We better get rid of Karl Anthony Towns. I got news for you. The market ain't great. And you gave up all your assets for Mikal Bridges.
Unless
so you're pretty
stuck. Then we're having a conversation.
You're not getting, listen, unless you become a third team. Okay, if you want to become a third team, and listen, everything's up on a whiteboard in NBA offices right now. So if they can become a third team and there's somebody else that can provide the assets to Milwaukee, somebody that wants Karl Anthony Towns, Phoenix, maybe Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns, if they're delusional enough to think that they can still win right now and they got to get rid of Durant, and you start doing all these different things and you get 3 or 4 teams involved, maybe. But there's no chance that the Knicks are going to go dangle Karl Anthony Towns for a player like Giannis, and Milwaukee's going to be even halfway interested. Absolutely, they have no assets to pair with him, no draft picks, no young players anybody wants. Okay, so they're stuck with this. They got to add depth. And they got to ask themselves if Tom Thibodeau is a coach that can take a pretty much what's going to be largely, for all intents and purposes, the same roster next year. They've got to tinker around the margins besides something coming out of left field.
We'll get to Thibodeau.
Do more with that.
We'll get to Tibbs in a minute, but Sean, I saw you raising your eyebrows just like me to saying Cat for Giannis. I'm saying, look, if you gonna trade Cat for anybody, it's for Giannis. Okay, like
Yeah,
that's a
well,
trade that you entertain.
Of
no
course.
doubt. You got to answer. You got to answer the phone if that's the call. But I think the one thing you're missing here, because clearly, if we're talking asset for asset, the Knicks wouldn't. The Bucks can find more assets elsewhere. But we know this league. We know how things work. If Giannis goes into the office and says, "Hey, I want to go one place," and that's 31st and 7th Avenue, it's a completely different story, right? Him and Cat make roughly the same money. He could force his way there. And, you know, my gut tells me the Bucks would try to do right by him. The Knicks still have a first round. Our first rounds they can move. They have that 2026 Wizards top 8 protected. They have a first in 2028 they can move as well. Maybe they take some bad deals, the Kuzma deal off of their books as well. Some way to figure it out. But yeah, if it's 1-for-1 asset, Knicks don't have enough. But if Giannis goes and starts banging his chest and says he wants to put on a Knicks uniform, a lot of things can happen very quickly.
Hearing you
as long as we're going to do
hopefully,
though, as long as we're going to do that, then yeah. If he says he wants to, my Warriors, if he says he wants to go there, then we're getting him. But in an open market, no.
Well, hearing you say, Sean, I have a feeling they would do right by Giannis. Just makes me so sad once again for Damian Lillard because the Portland Trailblazers really fleeced him, and I'll never forgive them for that. I wish them only bad things because of how they did my guy Damian Lillard. But the report that came out yesterday regarding from Shams regarding, you know, the conversations, the internal meetings that the Knicks are currently having. The biggest thing that stood out to a lot of people, Brad, and you spoke about this briefly, is Tibbs. And I've been somebody who has been very fond of Tibbs. And I have said, look, I think a lot of what the Knicks have been able to accomplish and the culture established in the locker room is because of everything that Tom Thibodeau has done. I think he has, you know, a great relationship with his players. But on the other side of that coin, I've also said being a locker room guy and having the respect of your locker room doesn't necessarily mean that you are the coach to take them to the next level. Two things can be true. And I think when we talk about Tom Thibodeau, we talk about a coach whose coaching style just does not translate in the postseason. It hits a wall. And we have seen that in various different scenarios, but I feel like it has never been more glaring than it was in this particular postseason. So, Brad, where do the Knicks go from a coaching standpoint? And then, Sean, definitely feel free to follow before we wrap this up.
Well, it's all about alternatives. So, you know, let's ask Mike Budenholzer if he comes out. You know, Mike. Okay, so it's all about your alternatives for starters. And if you think that that is a coach that's going to get you to another level, there are coaches that are good for taking a team from flat to good. And those aren't always the same coaches that are good at taking a team from good to great. It's a different step. It's smaller tinkers. It's the way that you handle lineups. It's the way that you handle minutes distribution. It's a small thing like if you can get around Karl Anthony Towns and playing drop coverage and find a way to cover for him. Those aren't always the same tactics that you can use for a team that wants to make that bigger leap from flat to good. Okay, and so maybe Tom Thibodeau is not that guy. I swore, Ashley, when I woke up, I promised myself I'm not going to make this about the Warriors today, but I keep finding all these comparisons. You know,
Mark Jackson, the Warriors Steve Kerr.
When they fired Mark Jackson, a lot of people were against that because relative to the recent past of the Golden State Warriors, Mark Jackson had worked miracles. This was a ridiculous franchise. They couldn't win anything. They were a doormat, a punchline. All of a sudden, they're a 50-win team and going to the second round, upsetting the Nuggets in the first round. They're doing things nobody thought possible. You're going to fire this guy? But the Warriors made a tough decision. Even when Stephen Curry publicly said, I support Mark Jackson, they said Mark Jackson was the guy to get us to a first-round team. He's not the guy to get us to a championship. And the very next season, with largely the same roster, Sean Livingston was the only notable addition. Steve Kerr wins a championship by changing the offense, ball and player movement, goes away from a lot of the things that Mark Jackson did. Is there a coach out there that with roughly the same roster can actually make that kind of difference for the New York Knicks moving forward, assuming they have largely the same roster next year? The Knicks have to decide that. Usually it doesn't work out the way that it does for Golden State. Usually you think you're bringing in this big change and you're still kind of, you know, against your roster and you go, players can take you. But sometimes there is a coaching change that can make that difference, and the Knicks might be evaluating that right now.
This is year one with this squad still. People forget that. What if the Indiana Pacers blew up that squad they had last year? That's the exact same roster, almost 1 through 8 for the Indiana Pacers. They're now in the final. So I think more of this, if I had to pick between Tibbs and the roster improving, I lean on the roster improving. Go find out how much Santi Aldama is going to cost. Go find out how much Nikhil Alexander-Walker is going to cost. How much is Ty Jerome going to cost? Fill out that roster, get deep. The Pacers are in the finals because they have two guys that make $42 million in Halliburton and Siakam. No one else on the roster makes over $20 million. They are deep. They are ahead of the game on that second apron that teams are dealing with.
Their coach does go to the bench, though, Sean. We do know. Rick Carlisle was going deep into his rotations, and that's something that teams are going to have to get out of the habit of not doing.
Hey, he's used to going to that roster and that bench because it was the same bench as last year. They've been playing together for almost 2 full seasons. He knew what he had on the bench. It wasn't that same way for the New York Knicks and Tom Thibodeau.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, look, we are going to keep our eyes, obviously, on what the Knicks are doing. I know I will. I know Brad will for different reasons, just to torment me. But look, the offseason is almost here. We still have a massively fun series that is going to happen in just a few days. But with the offseason approaching, so are the rumors. And we're going to dive into a few of them after the break. Look, last week we were comparing some of the most blockbuster offseason moves in NBA history after Shams said that this is going to be, quote, the craziest offseason ever. Well, the rumors have already started coming out, including this one here, where people around the league expect Naz Reid to opt out of his contract and enter free agency, saying, quote, Randall holds a $30.9 million player option that he must exercise or decline by the 29th of this month. Reid has his own $15 million option that may, around the league, expect last season's sixth man of the year to possibly decline. Making things very, very interesting. Once again, this is probably the most chaotic and exciting time of the year in the NBA because everybody and anybody has an inside track as to what is happening and who's going where. But let's start with Naz Reid. Brad, Naz Reid headed out of Minnesota. Obviously, the team did not perform in the way that they expected to or wanted to. A lot of disappointments across the board. We can have that conversation for a different day. But Naz Reid is a little bit of an interesting player here. Again, last season sixth man of the year could be a huge asset to anybody who's able to pick him up. Do you expect him to be in a Timberwolves jersey next season, or you think he's going to be on the move for sure?
I think he's probably going to be on the move unless they can find something to do with Randall. You guys are forcing me to bring up the Warriors here. They're the betting favorite to get him. Let me tell you something. Don't let the Warriors get Naz Reid start stretching the floor. But yeah, I think that they're going to have some problems. And I wouldn't actually. I'd be a little bit hesitant to say it was disappointing again in Minnesota. I mean, 2 straight conference finals. They're the Timberwolves.
No, so Julius and Anthony Edwards were disappointing. I'm saying that. Disappointing.
Well, sure, everyone's disappointed when they lose, but you're obligated when the season ends to take a macro look at things and evaluate what we did against all reasonable expectations. That's a team that was battling on the play-in line for most of the season. They end up in the conference finals. They get a 50-point win against the Thunder. Yeah, they're short of a championship right now. They got to find out how they can get there. But when they traded Karl-Anthony Towns, it was largely seen as a money move. And if Naz Reid is going to go out on the market and get the kind of money that he probably can attract. Now, there's a lot of teams out there that don't really have a bunch of money to spend, so the market always dictates this stuff. But yeah, the Timberwolves are going to have to decide with their new ownership how much money they want to commit to a guy like Naz Reid if they can't do anything with Julius Randle. No question.
Sean, I'm coming to you for this one because this one got a lot of attention, and it's about Mr. Kevin Durant himself. Okay, so per Shams, the Spurs and Kevin Durant had mutual interest at the trade deadline, which could potentially be re-explored again this summer. Now, this is going to be interesting because obviously Giannis is a name that a lot of people have going to San Antonio, myself included. I think it'd be a phenomenal fit. But a move for Kevin Durant would cost San Antonio significantly less. Obviously, we know KD is older than Giannis. We all know Milwaukee's going to be on a rebuild if Giannis were to leave Milwaukee, and they're going to want a lot of return for the MVP, multiple MVP, still in MVP contention every season, in his prime. The list goes on and on. If you're San Antonio, though, I feel like you got to make the move for Giannis. KD's just not the fit. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, there's not very many players in the NBA that are truly plug and play. Like, you could drop them off anywhere, they'll make an impact. Kevin Durant is one of those guys. But if we're talking long term and trying to build, you add De'Aaron Fox. These are the moves they've been making are all to look long term. Then you, of course, you have the Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle. You have a lot of young pieces you can move potentially for Giannis. If it's between Giannis or KD, I go Giannis because that gives you a longer runway, of course, with Wembanyama. The thing about the whole matter is, if I'm Giannis, why do I go to the West? That's a rough road to go to the West, right? If I'm Giannis, I'm doing everything in my power to stay in the East because it's just going to be a lot easier for me to compete and a lot easier road to the finals. That's what LeBron James did for years. He would never come out and tell you, hey, I wanted to make sure I was in the East because the West was treacherous. He would never say that, but that definitely was a factor in his decision-making to always be on the East and that side of the bracket. So, of course, I would love to see Giannis.
To that point, though, Sean, would you say, though, then, like, when you look at the landscape of the East, right, you have the Boston Celtics. They're going to look slightly different next season, obviously, with Tatum's injury. And, again, New ownership. They can't keep everybody. The Cavs are intact. The Knicks are intact. Obviously, the only move, that, again, to your point, if Giannis kind of forced front office's hand in Milwaukee and said, look, send me to New York. Outside of that, the rest of the teams are not competing for a chip. At least in the West, it's a harder path, but there's more championship caliber teams out there, I would say.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, as we talked about earlier, I think every team in the league is picking up the phone if Giannis Antetokounmpo is on the other line. So if he does end up in the West, he's going to be able to compete and bring that whatever West team he lands on up to the top of the conference. But it's still a rougher road either way. But to go back to the core of it, Durant, you can plug and play anywhere, but I think long-term, Giannis would be a better fit. But Durant, you throw him anywhere, honestly, I truly believe that, and he's making big, big impact.
Brad, I swear, if you bring Giannis and the Warriors into this conversation, I'm going to lose my mind. Go ahead.
No, but I see what you guys are doing, and it works. You know, I agree with Sean. Stay in the East. Now, this opens up a whole other can, which we've talked about, Ashley. We got to get rid of conferences. This is a varsity JV situation. An NBA team should not be able to be up playing a JV schedule. But that aside, as long as them's are the rules, then, yeah, I would stay in the East. And the Knicks, that's why unless they can get Giannis, which I see the seeds you guys are laying. But listen, if they can get Giannis, then do it. But even if they can't, like, the Celtics are pretty much sitting next year out. The Sixers are a mess. The Cavs broke down. The East is open. The Knicks don't have to, like, go crazy here. And so, yeah. But, yeah, if you talk about the Spurs, it reminded my daughter a couple of days ago, she was bumping through the channels, and she came across – you guys seen the movie 17 again with Zac Efron? Zac Efron goes back to high school, man. He's got his pick. He's Zac Efron. He's in high school. He's cleaning up. That's the Spurs right now. They have Wembanyama. They got time. They got assets. They got Vassell. They got everything. Anybody wants to date the Spurs right now, even if it's in the West, because you got immediate contention and you got long-term with Wembanyama. You've got a stable organization in the Spurs. They have all these assets that can provide the team that's giving up a team like Giannis or Durant everything that they would want in return. The Spurs are Zac Efron roaming the high school halls right now. It is a cleanup situation. They can have anything they want.
What an amazing metaphor. Shout out to your daughter for putting you on game. Look, when we come back, we're diving into our social media bag, and some of these answers are going to hurt my feelings. I'm just preparing myself mentally. We'll discuss after this. We We are just 2 days away from the NBA Finals, but I wanted to revisit some of the craziest things that happened during the playoffs, at least so far. So this was the question that I posed on my social media, and we're going to dive into some of the answers. So one of the answers that I got, drum roll please. That's me trying to sing. All right. The champion Celtics going down and Tatum's injury. That was definitely difficult to watch. That was difficult to see. I made no secret about not being able to really celebrate that Knicks win because I just felt so bad for Jason Tatum. What else do we got here on deck? All the hype for the Lakers getting Luka, and they were out round one while the Mavericks got the number one pick. I'm still calling it a scam, but yes, you are right. Keep going. Wow, this hurts. Okay. The Knickerbockers blowing a 14-point lead with under 3 minutes to go in game one of the Eastern Conference Finals at home. Yes, we don't need to be reminded. Moving on. What else we got here? Aaron Gordon, 2-game winners. Yeah, Aaron Gordon is what we like to call him on this show. Absolutely insane. Guys, of those answers, which one for you was the most crazy? Sean, start with you.
I have to go with the Knicks blowing game one in the conference finals. Aaron Nesmith hit 6 threes in a row. Legitimately, speaking of the Warriors, Brad, morphed in to Steph Curry. It's unbelievable. He'll never hit that ever even close on air, pre-game, post-game, in the gym, practicing by himself. If you go back and watch those 6 threes, they are unbelievable. That flipped the entire series without question. From a playoffs that had almost everything. Crazy stuff happening left and right. Nesmith hitting 6 threes in a frame is absurd.
Okay, so there's no question that that's the answer, but it's actually it needs to be looked at from the reverse angle. It's the Pacers coming back to win that game, not the Knicks blowing it. And you want to know why?
There were so many other answers available to choose from, guys. There were so many available.
Listen, but this is unquestionably the answer, and I'm going to tell you why. 3 times entering these playoffs, there have been 1,640 games where a team trailed by 7 points, at least 7 points, inside the final minute. 1,640 games. One time a team had come back to win, down 7 inside the final minute. The Pacers have done it 3 times in these playoffs. I've run the odds on this. I've done it with Stephen O, our Sportsline data guru. You want to know what the odds on that based solely on historical data is? 1 in over 4 billion. 1 in over 4 billion. The Pacers did it 3 times. They did it to the Bucks, they did it to the Cavs, and then they did it to your guys' Knicks in game 1 of that series. So it's not just the Knicks blowing that or the Pacers coming back, however you want to frame that. It's that the Pacers have done that 3 times in these playoffs. Again, 1 in 4 billion based on historical data that would happen. Unbelievable.
Again, I gave you guys so many answers to choose from, and you both decided to punch down and pick the same answer. I mean, we had the rigged lottery was right there for the taking. It was literally right there for the taking. And you took the Knicks and the Pacers. Okay. Well, I mean,
I believe in the lottery. I'm a lottery believer.
That's a different conversation. We're going to have to get you back to fight that claim, because I don't know. We were kind of diving into the conspiracy of it all. And if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. I'm just saying. Listen, before we wrap up, give me your game 1 predictions. Who's coming out? Quick answer. Sean, game 1. Who's locking things up?
Oklahoma City has been hanging out, chilling at the crib in their own beds for a week. I think they get the W. I think the 9-point spread, 9.5 is too many. I think it's closer than that, but the Thunder get the win.
Brad, give me your answer real quick.
Yeah, Thunder in game 1, 2, and 4 and 5. This is gonna be a quick series.
It's a sweep. As a Knicks fan, that makes me very happy. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Brad Botkin, Sean Little, making his debut on Triple Threat. If you missed any moment of today's show, scan this QR code and watch the full episode available on YouTube at the CBS Sports YouTube page. And make sure you guys keep it locked with us, because we're not done yet. We will be back next week with a brand new episode.